Good morning and welcome to the dialogue this morning. My name is Simapolo and it's time we sit and look at the headlines that made the week. We internalize those issues of national importance. Welcome aboard. Those who are watching us via our social media platforms and elsewhere, wherever you are welcome. The dialogue comes every Saturday morning at 10, and we host guests to go deep into the discussion on those matters of national importance. And it is my pleasure to host Richard Baguma once again. And Richard Baguma is a communication specialist and an analyst. I will ask him to say one or two words and then we open the show.
Good morning, dear viewers. As always, nice to be back.
Good.
I hope you have had your cup of coffee this morning as you contemplate the monkeypox.
You continue to be an advocate of coffee.
Yeah, absolutely. I took my cup of coffee this morning in your presence, so you can attest
specifically
to
Ugandan coffee? Or?
Yeah, I usually say Ugandan coffee, but if you must, East African coffee, at worst, African coffee.
Okay. Thank you so much for coming, Richard.
Very welcome.
And again, it is my pleasure to welcome Simon Senyong, and he's a lawyer and an activist. Welcome, Simon.
Thank you very much, Apollo, for hosting me. I am honored to be in the presence of Richard. I used to watch Richard when I was a small boy, way back on WBS TV.
Yes.
I think I was in my primary, crossing over to secondary school.
Yes.
So sitting in his presence is very honorable. And obviously, as he advocates for taking coffee in the midst of the cancellation of the coffee agreement. Yeah. I know what you do about that. Yeah, but thank you very much.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much, Simon. And it's a pleasure having you on the dialogue this morning. Again, I welcome our viewers from wherever you're watching us from, abroad and back home in Uganda. Here in Uganda, we are concluding the first year of the five term of parliament, and again the 5 term of government, the NRM government, and a lot is happening. The politics going on in Omoro County, where several political formations are vying for that seat in parliament, and again the issue of high commodity prices is still very valid, and a lot has happened. But like I said, talking about the first year of Parliament, yesterday the Parliament concluded and considered, passed the appropriation bill that gave Ugandans 48 trillion budget for the next financial year 2020-2023, and the biggest chunk of this budget is going to health and education, which is for the first time, I think, is coming for the first time, and I think this appeases some of the concerns that have been coming in from different stakeholders. But again, not only the budget has been passed in Parliament, the coffee agreement, and more specifically the report of the Trade and Industry Committee on the coffee deal that was signed between Vinci Coffee Company Limited and the Ugandan government, specifically the Ministry of Finance, was also debated, and some resolutions were made. Actually, the resolution, almost all the resolutions were adopted, including one that directs the government to cancel the deal between Vinci Company Limited, Coffee Company Limited, and the Ugandan government. That will be part of our discussion, and we'll be looking at the fate of this agreement now, the whole deal. After Parliament pronounces itself on this particular contentious matter, then we wait to see what would happen, and that is what we'll be trying to look at in that context. But again, like I said, that politics is taking shape after 1 year of the 5-year term, Dr. Richard Kanukiza Besigye recently revived a campaign. He says it is meant to awaken Ugandans who have not been so conscious about several issues, including the hike and the rise in commodity prices, as well as issues to do with bad governance. He was confined in his home for almost a week, but later security agencies withdrew from his home. But I think it is yesterday when he was stopped in Kasanga town for almost the whole day, holding him in one place as he tried to access the city center, maybe on his agenda to awaken with his vehicle, with those big megaphones in that campaign anyway. But like I said, that is politics that seems to be now dominating here and there. Richard, let's go straight to Parliament. I don't know if you want to make a comment on the budget, but specifically we would want to look at the fate of the coffee, the Vinci coffee deal. Very controversial deal. We talked about it here. We may not go back into what was in the agreement and what, but now that Parliament has pronounced itself on this matter, what should we expect?
Perhaps the lawyer will talk about the legal gymnastics. My own thinking, taking from the previous experiences of these kinds of agreements, is that Vinci will walk away with money from Uganda government if government takes the recommendation of Parliament wholesale. The lawyer will tell me that, but I think the way the agreement is written is Vinci gains anywhere. Whether you follow the agreement, whether you cancel. And Apollo, like I said previously, if this gentleman, I'm trying to recall your name.
Simon.
If Simon becomes a government lawyer, Simon will be signing a similar agreement. And I would like Simon to get into senior government positions. They are very good. And we can get this recording and remind him.
What do you mean? What do you mean that when you join government?
I don't know what he's going to say. I have not heard him speak, but I think he's going to spit fire. He's going to do. But let Simon become a senior. When you join government, let him become a senior official in the government in a legal position. Simon will
Are you insinuating that when you join government, your professional competencies are compromised?
Now, I did not talk about the compromised professional competencies. No, that is your phrase. I'm not even sure that it is accurate or applicable in the context. No. You see, when you're outside the government, there are certain realities that we were talking here with you about the journalists who are now members of parliament, parliamentary journalists who are now members of parliament. The language, the conduct, the positions they had when they were parliamentary journalists have now turned 360 now that they are members of parliament. They are your colleagues. Apollo, by the way, you may go to parliament someday. These things you are saying, but they will put out your recording and they will be wondering whether this is the same Apollo who has So for me, we can talk about Vinci, we can talk about the recommendation of Parliament. The value of the parliamentary probe, for me, the biggest value, has been to expose some of the things that often happen behind the scenes. And like I was saying, this is not the first agreement of this nature. With all manner of concessions, with all conditions that when the thing doesn't go, still government will pay. I mean, this is not the first one. No, we have had these ones. What the value for me of this one has been the level of exposure of these kinds of things that happen behind the scenes. And for me, I can tell you that I am not even sure that the people who signed this agreement or caused its signing are not the ones who are hitting it publicly. Yeah, because you see, we work in a very guerrilla way. Our approach to management is very gorilla. That's what we know. And so I can give you concession and go back and get another forum to hammer you.
What do you gain in that?
Then it doesn't work. Then it doesn't work. Let me give you the example of the homosexuality law. Where is it?
It was struck down in courts of law.
You see, I in one of the times when I went to the UN General Assembly, Dr. Honorable Hakana Rugunda was our permanent representative to the UN. And you see, for him, he was permanent representative. But although he was ambassador, he was at cabinet level. Several of them were actually. So, while we were having a discussion, because we were discussing that bill when it was in Parliament, we had all agreed that you cannot combine the gay lobby and the anti-death sentence lobby. A small country as Uganda, and you go against them and win. Not possible. They will hammer you from all financial institutions. They will hammer you from all bilateral agreements. They will hammer you. So when you are there, you have to be realistic about these realities. But when you come back, you read the mood
of the citizen.
You say, okay, I'll put on my combat and sign that law even when I'm in combat, not even when I'm in a tie, with TV cameras, But who took Parliament to court about this not having quorum or whatever it was? It was a person who had been legal assistant, head of the legal team of the president. My colleague, my friend, personal friend, the Honorable Foxodo.
Yeah, Andrew Mwenda and others.
So are those people anti-government? Or are they not friends to...
They are friends.
So for me, I'm even not sure that this particular argument is not being hit by the ones who caused its signing. So hit it, let it collapse. And you say, but you see Parliament. See, blah, blah, blah. So our gorilla approach is sometimes, for me, I don't want to dismiss them. But you gave me an opportunity to talk about the budget. For me, I think the budget is a bigger story than Vinci. Vinci takes a few hundred.
Before you go there,
a few hundred. Well, how many? 80 million?
Yeah, we can.
Or something? And
we can get time for that.
Yeah.
But I would want you to look at Parliament and the mood within which the whole committee worked out this report, presented to Parliament, and Parliament adopts it, and the mood in the citizenry about coffee, and
you know the chairperson of the committee that was investigating, and you know that he's a nephew of the president.
Yes, I know. Okay. And that's another point of another issue in the debate, that these are people who we know that are NRM. Though the petition,
you know his father.
Yeah.
He's a minister, isn't he?
He's a minister.
So this boy is hitting their own government.
Yeah, veterans and I was asking you, Baguma, after all this has happened, with the chair being an NRM, and now we see him and his committee working well with the opposition, does that show you something unique about the matter itself, or about Parliament?
First of all, I have my views about the existence of an opposition, particularly in Parliament. Opposition in Parliament. Does it really exist? For me, I think it's also a matter of debate.
But it is constitutional. It's a constitutional matter.
Yeah.
We have opposition in Parliament.
Yeah, it's a constitutional matter. I think slapping or pulling the ties of a traffic police officer can also be turned into a constitutional matter. The police officer has their rights, they are protected in the Constitution, but their ties are pulled on the road, and they are slapped, not once, not twice. So this thing of constitutional issues, yeah, they are constitutional, but how are they observed?
What is it?
You see, you say it's a constitutional provision. How are constitutional things observed? It's a constitutional matter that an army officer does not make pronouncements on political positions or take sides. Would you say it's not happening right now in our midst? Would you say currently it is not going on? wouldn't you say you have a huge crowd going to gather in northern Uganda, I think in Gulu? So for me, there is what ought to be, and there is what is. So we can talk about what ought to be, and we legitimately should. But we also must not pretend of what is. We must not pretend about what is. So when you have an agreement by a private company that has been signed by government, and a select number of committee members investigating that are summoned to meet the president, why? So why are we not making connections about these things? This is a private company, it has signed with government, parliament says investigate, and the president says you committee members come. But it is you, and you, not all of you. Why don't we make these connections? Members of parliament going to meet the president is not insignificant.
But Richard,
it's not an insignificant matter.
That's what makes this this discussion varied. That for a whole head of state expressing publicly his interest in a deal between a company, private company.
He did that 10 years ago in Rwachitura. That was 2014. Isn't that when the lady went and had some machines and roasted coffee and said, oh, these are the different flavors? Yeah, it's not, that expression is not now. That was it. And so this is almost a decade-long interest. And if the interest, you see the publicly stated interest, which is, I think, is very legitimate, is to add value to our coffee. That, as a coffee person, I am
legit.
Absolutely legit. But you see, you can get a legit cause and then infuse it with this kind of legitimacy that we are seeing. Yeah, and the people who are infusing this illegitimacy, I keep insisting, are not stupid. This, the wording, this man is a lawyer. The wording of that agreement, even when a non-lawyer reads it, we'll see the spirit and thinking and mind behind it. And so we cannot say that and so, for instance, why I believe that even when if you cancelled that agreement, government would pay anyway.
Either way.
Anyway, it will still pay anyway. So the company will walk away with advantage in any case.
Okay. Now to talk about the fate of those officials behind this agreement. What do you think will be the fate of this?
For me, I don't know the officials behind the agreement. I only know the officials in front of the agreement. So PSST, Minister of Finance, those are the officials in front of the agreement. But the officials behind, I don't know them.
Now that it has been struck down in Parliament, and what do you expect will be?
You see, it only depends on the calculation of those behind the agreement. If the calculation of those behind the agreement think that, because you put you see, you always put people in front of you to protect you. If you think that these people whom you have put in front to protect you have been damaged adequately, then you can remove them. They are easy to remove and move around, to shuffle. Yeah. But if you think they still retain some usefulness to you, they will stay there.
That is the state of affairs.
Absolutely.
Now. Simon,
yes.
You can come in and tell us the gravity of the matter before us here after Parliament adopts recommendations that shows that many clauses in that agreement were in breach of provisions in our constitution. What does that mean?
I think first of all it's to appreciate the contextual operation of the parliament in regards to the constitution. You see, our parliament has been designed specifically in regards to such standing committees such as the trade committee. Most of them have been designed to be post-mortem committees, because the most interesting discussion is not the aftermath of an agreement which has already been signed. It's actually where were they at the point of inception of such an agreement? So yes, it could be a private arrangement between a private company and the government. But you see, when a parliament is designed to offer more of a post-mortem perspective, it becomes problematic. And why do I tell you that? I'll give you a historical background. I like that Richard has built a very good basis about the historical interests of this particular subject. That 10 years ago, Enrica Piretti meets the president in Rwachtura, shows him a few coffee beans, says that actually I'm not open up a factory. Up till now, it has not been opened. It died at inception. But number two, it's for you to pick interest on what was the other subject at the time in Rwachtura. The subject was concerning the Lubowa Specialized Hospital. At the time, they go to negotiate with a company called Finasi and Rocco Construction that they are going to put up an international specialized hospital. The most expensive, by the way, in the world, whereby it had to take about 264 hospital beds at about about 379 US dollars, about 1.4 trillion Ugandan shillings. That means every bed was going for about 1 million US dollars. The most expensive. You talk about the legitimacy of the argument right now and the legitimacy that was fronted. Then the president's, and I have a copy of the letter that he signed. And if you can just read just the specific interest that the president cited in that letter. This is a letter written it was written to the Honorable Speaker of Parliament, then Rebecca Kadaga, by the President of Uganda. The subject was International Specialized Hospital of Uganda, but I'll jump to the clause about the interests. The President says, I therefore wish to confirm what Richard was saying, my unquestionable support for the International Specialized Hospital of Uganda and request Parliament to expedite its consideration of the project and accordingly approve its financing arrangements if they are in line with the law. Now, historical context here, right? At the time in 2014, they go to negotiate a hospital deal. The hospital deal was reviewed by lawyers. Parliament, the arrangement was that they were going to pay through promissory notes. But the idea of the promissory notes became contentious because an approval process of Parliament had been skipped. There was no consultation with the Uganda Medical Association, which has specialized individuals who would appreciate specialized medical facilities, but also consultation with the Ministry of Health was not considered. So what happens is that Parliament gets to realize that there is a problem with this specific arrangement. Parliament raises up, dust about what is happening here. But either way, the president made a stamp. The same incident happened that even when they were investigating what was happening, the president still summoned them and he told them, this is my position concerning this matter. What are the relatable facts in this situation? It was the same individual you're having in question today.
Okay.
You're having another, another different company of the same individual. In the middle of the negotiation of the contract, you know what happens? Finasi, which is run by Pinetti, goes ahead and forcefully ejects Rocco Construction and gets a company called Power China to be part of the construction machinery. The military was used to actually enforce. And do I need to remind you the events of what happened in the previous parliament? Was it the 10th parliament? Where members of parliament go to visit the
and
facility.
even the ministers and the
PS
of the ministry were locked out.
They're told you can't access the facility. The point I'm making to you is that the parliament is designed to be post-mortem. I would have expected that the parliament would have learned from this history. Because there is nothing so peculiar about it. You have the same individual in question. The thing that Richard talks about...
What else would have Parliament done not to be to be running post-mortems?
You see, if they had done the due diligence required in terms of following up on the Lubowa Hospital, now, irrespective of the controversies that were surrounding it, then they would have known. Because the technical people from the Attorney General's office were the same technical people who dealt with the same individual before when they were making the Lubowa Hospital agreement. So the thing is that due diligence had to have been done. But you see, the idea, and again, which is propagated by the media, is that you want to be quick to forget some of these facts. So in analyzing and assessing this topic, you should have tied the historical threads together, and you see what this means. That actually, when we talk about best interests, they're not only showed by the agreement, they are showed by the individual who wants to be the propagator of the individual, the interests of the Ugandans. Two key areas here. You're talking about health and agriculture. Agriculture is the backbone of Uganda, all right? Health is the source of that livelihood that would run the backbone. All of them are being handed over to one individual who has demonstrated historically that actually that's not their key interest in defending the Ugandans' interests.
The investor?
The investor. Because they have a historical record. So for me, my analysis, it would be short-sighted for you to only look at the current agreement. It is very important that you look at the people behind it. Let me give you another basis of that. Remember when we had the controversy concerning the oil deals?
Yeah.
I think it was in the 9th Parliament or 10th Parliament. The issue was not just beyond the interests in what Jared Karuhanga's argument was, that, you know, declare, all right, expose the oil agreements for public interaction. It went beyond that, the exposure. It was about who are the individuals who are involved behind all this. Why are we not questioning them? What have we done before? I would have expected after the Luwa Hospital scandal, other standing committees which are responsible for public accountability would have been called into question. The Luwa Hospital deal, we lost over 70 million US dollars in what Charles was in what Richard was telling you, that either way we have to pay. So whether or not the agreement has been cancelled. Now, you talk about the question of what is the viability legally of the recommendations of Parliament. I think they are majorly inconsequential. I think they are simply meant to drum up some political airwaves to show that the government is active.
Really?
To sort of, you know, and you know, it's akin to how Parliament has been used as a political tool. Simple example. When the former late Kampala City Mayor, Nasa Sebagala, crossed over to NRM and wanted to get a political position, it was usual of the guerrilla politics of the president that, you see, for me, I've appointed you. Go before the appointments committee of Parliament, they have rejected you. Not only for him and very many other individuals. So Parliament has consistently been used for that. I'll give another second example. During the contentious BOU saga, the COSASE committee sat down and made recommendations. As to whether they were followed, eventually it ended up into a legal battle. So the idea was that Parliament was going to be, or Parliament is being used as a forum of exposing that and as a wrestling front for different interests that may be concerned. So what you may call the deep state and what you may call now what Richard was telling you, what you see as the shallow state, what you may see as outside. So there is that fight between the deep state and that shallow state. That, look here, who is the determinant of this power? All these things are happening at a time when Uganda has withdrawn, interestingly, from the International
Coffee Organization.
So you withdraw, and you also withdraw. Remember that organization, ZANU, which is in charge of implementing the International Coffee, I think, Agreement, which represents over 98% of the producers of coffee and 87% of the consumers of the coffee. So you're withdrawing from something accountable. When I read for you just one simple clause from this Vinci Agreement, and for you to see actually how actually it was never in the interests of the Ugandans. So this is clause 4.3. It says protection of local coffee processors. We have said that you've withdrawn them from an international entity which ideally would have protected them. And obviously when you cite reasons, for example, the unfair tariffs, and then the use of apparently primitive mechanisms of dealing with coffee, and then you come and sign an agreement and you say, government shall use all reasonable endeavors. Now, reasonable endeavors to put in place measures which protect local coffee processors. What would have been previously, historically, how have we protected local coffee producers? By empowering the local banks, by making sure that the production process is efficient for them, making sure that the taxes are reasonable, making sure that in fact the cooperative unions, which would have protected the regional interests, agricultural interests, are made strong. You've removed them. And you say that this should be in line with national, bilateral, regional, and international laws. But you see you've just withdrawn from important international and bilateral agreements. And then you're saying that this agreement solely is going to protect the interests of the local people.
It doesn't add up.
It doesn't add up, but also shows you the war history. That was the same argument, that we want to stop the big medical hemorrhage going through financing of individuals, because the biggest argument in that agreement was that let us save over 150 million US dollars that were being spent as a financial hemorrhage towards medical tourism. The basis was that use that money to finance the hospital. The same clause happens here, that the government is saying that no, look here, we have an investor, but we shall finance the investor. What is the difference between this and the whole Namave, business park scandal? Where, and the whole thing goes back to Parliament still, where Parliament is sitting before, Uganda Land Commission appears before Parliament, and it is saying, look here, for us, we never knew how that land was distributed. The Nakawa land, we never knew.
So Simon, you seem to imply that what we have seen in Parliament for all these, I think it is close to a month, the committee, meeting key stakeholders, then they come up with a report, the report is debated, the mood is really high. All this is post-mortem, and it's part of the political gymnastics that happen in this country.
It focuses you on one thing, first of all, that our constitutional order is problematic in terms of the parliamentary system. Okay? It is problematic because it is designed to be post-mortem, and that was, by the way, deliberate. I'm sure Richard then was old enough to understand that 1995, probably I was about 2 years then, that the designers and the framers of the Constitution had a particular background where they were coming from to protect particular political interests. And they definitely knew that power had to majorly be in the hands of the executive. No wonder that the actions you see right now, that the visit which called, it is not an insignificant visit. That Parliament, which should be designed to be sovereign, so to say, and independent of the influence of the executive or the judiciary, can be summoned by the head of the executive to go and explain or advise or seek guidance, as it has been known before. The same thing happened when there was the whole debate of the handshake. Remember the UNRWA handshake? The same thing, the committee was summoned, that the president had to guide them on how to deal, to explain the political consequences
is it guiding
of their actions.
Is it guiding them or providing an input? Because from this particular meeting, we were told, the president was saying, if it is possible, please don't cancel the agreement, but make some review, do some review.
But I've just read for you what he said, the letter written in 2014, over 10 years ago, about 10 years ago, written, stating in the same language about the issue of interests. It was the same thing. The president has made clear pronouncements of his side concerning this Enrica lady. If at all it was about national interests, when the MTN was being accused of spying on Ugandan nationals, it was not hard for the government to boot out, I think, the lady from Rwanda and one of the managers, I think, from Italy or somewhere. They were sent out. Why is this the same Enrica being protected, a foreign national? What is it so special about what she's doing?
Okay, you have your views there, but let me hear from Richard. Simon thinks that Parliament did not do its work, and now it is coming to do just post-mortem. Do you believe so?
No,
because we people,
is there something called pre-mortem?
We voters, we voters who have been looking at Parliament in these 4 weeks, we are looking at a different Parliament that seems to be actually independent, or trying to assert its independence and even NRM MPs are standing to challenge even the position of the national chairman. That's what we see.
Yeah, and I congratulate you for having squinted eyes. I must thank you very much for seeing shadows. Yeah. You see, I don't know if there is anything called pre-mortem. Parliament had no pre-mortem role. So they have no role to play. So you can't say they didn't play their role. They had no role anyway.
It is they actually who raised the red flag about Lubowa and even this Vinci.
Yeah, so theirs is post-mortem. And I always tell people that as a health communicator, I tell people that you do post-mortem on things which you are going to bury. It's post-mortem and then bury. That's the process of post-mortem. So what for me actually what the president was trying to do was to resuscitate the argument by saying go and improve on it. For me it was providing oxygen. I think even in him he said this is certainly going to, it will be next for burial. Vinci as a company will gain money anyway. But the whole now there are always there are the stated interests and of course the unstated interests. And then all of us adults, even sometimes children, will come and tell you, oh, daddy do this, but their interest is the other one. So we see that all the time. It cannot be by coincidence, it cannot be by mistake that you have a particular lady that has, by the way, has access, or there is access being provided for her to almost $1 billion. It cannot be by mistake, definitely. This is not money that you can play around with. No way. So there must be interests unstated.
So Vinci is a unique investor in his own.
No, Vinci is not an investor. Vinci is a front. But that's my position.
Okay.
Vinci is a front. Vinci is not an investor. You see, you need to go to Namamve. There is a Mabati on that land. You know, by the way, electricity was diverted there. I am sure they spent over 5 billion.
Yeah, it is around 7 billion, I think, that has been spent.
But
so
you
far.
see, Apollo, let's break down a billion in 2 million. That's when you know, the viewers cannot appreciate a billion.
A billion is one.
No, it's 1,000 million. So it means we spent 7,000 million to make that ground ready for this coffee.
But nothing
is
on the ground.
No, there is something. There is a Mabati house for the security guard and a Karatrin on the side. It's not that is what the 7,000.
So Baguma, you said even if the agreement is cancelled, either way we'll have to pay.
Anyway.
But we have already spent 7 billion already.
Yeah, you see, for me, the payment we give, that was what? The other time we have paid 70 million on Rubo. If you add the money, it's a few hundred, if you add the total. You see, the target is not the 70. No. When you bury this agreement, it will then cost us maybe 50 million, maybe 70 million. The target is the hundreds of millions. So the one who is targeting the hundreds of millions, if they only take 50, it's a loss. Yes, if you have your deal, Apollo, you have your deal, you are expecting to get 100 million. Then this one, Najuk Suza, and you get 5 million of the 100. It's a loss on your part. So that for me, the efforts to resuscitate this, to keep it alive, to try to sanitize it, is because the target are the other few $100 million. Those few hundreds.
They see that now a loss is inevitable.
But we also know that if you are in this process, you are happy to have recommendations from Parliament. Because as usual, you will not implement them. And that's it. So you have played your political part, given Parliament some breathing, right? Because they are going to go saying,
Yeah.
Your coffee is safe. We have, they know it's just recommendations. They can't enforce them. They really need too much force to enforce them. Stop the process of budget. We want to give you money. No one is going. They are not going to get into that. And so the public is placated. Parliament looks a bit, but then the deal continues because
let me ask a lawyer. What do you think happens next after Parliament recommends termination of this deal? Will we still lose the billions and trillions?
I think, as I've told you, that we have a precedent. So it is not rocket science what's going to happen. We have a precedent for the Ruboa Hospital incident, where we invested, we actually invested 379 million US dollars, approximately 1.4 trillion Ugandan shillings. Even after the Parliament recommended the termination, we still had to go as far as paying over 70 million US dollars. Now, the question of the recommendations of Parliament are subject to the enforcing powers, and I think the Parliament should be aware and alive to the fact that actually the same person they want to target has demonstrated the weight of their power in the Ruboa Hospital thing, where she locked out ministers and members of Parliament from going to see what was happening on ground at the Ruboa Hospital. So, in terms of enforcement, the recommendations will be inconsequential. If you're talking about the practical approach, the reality as is on the ground. Because enforcing would be a discussion of you're enforcing it on who. Okay. If you're dealing with what I've told her, this is part of the deep state. This lady, she's part of the deep state, the unseen state.
So whereas Parliament has recommended cancellation of the agreement, we should not hope for the best.
All they can do is to recommend. And that's what it stands to be, recommendations. But you see, there's something which Baguma mentioned, which I think we needed as a country to reflect on strongly, but Parliament to be much more proactive. He asked a question, and I think it was a question to provoke discussion, that there is post-mortem, is there pre-mortem? The thing is this, look at mistakes we made in 2014. We have had about 8, 9, 10 years to correct them. Parliament never took the steps to correct them. In other democracies that would aspire to be like, what would happen is that we would have taken a step back and say, look here, let's design legislation to guide investors. First of all, what qualifies you to be an investor? Who is an investor? Because what happens right now, an investor is a subject of political discussion. You are an investor in the eyes of the investing power. So when you look like a person like, for the 2 agreements that have been signed for this lady, it was government to supply the resources and government to pay even for the losses. Is that an investor who has no money? The Katikkiro of Buganda was sarcastically making such statements, saying, you even who doesn't understand anything about coffee, you want to come and guide us? You want to add value? So the thing is that we would have designed a law. Parliament, because under Article 77 to 79, has an obligation to design laws for the peace, order, and good governance of Ugandans, to defend their interests. So they would have taken a step back 9 years ago, if at all Parliament actually has the interests of the people at heart, to design appropriate laws to protect this so-called thing of investors. Because right now we are discussing Vinci because they have touched sort of the most painful part of our lives. There are very many other issues in Uganda which are Ugandans don't realize they will affect them in the long term.
We are now grappling with the high cost of electricity because of a bad agreement signed between the Umeme,
right? And all that was about
government.
investors, the Karuma situation, investors. So you have very many situations of Ugandans until they come back biting to them that we don't want to take critical discussion. So for me, I think the pre-mortem that would have been done was having a law. But again, the players or the people who are supposed to be concerned about this discussion don't seem to mount more pressure. You know, I will ask you a question. Why is the media so much coming out? Why is it acting concerned concerning the Vinci deal 9 years later? if at all actually the media had a strategic interest in protecting the views and the interests of the Ugandans, it would have been at the forefront of pushing and lobbying for this. The judiciary itself, you know, the thing with what we are doing right now by being on this show is to build civic competence. That look here, under the laws, under Article 50 of the Constitution, you can actually take on a case under public interest litigation.
Yeah, true.
As a public interest litigant, I am concerned that my interests are going to be affected because of this coffee deal. That majority of the Ugandans who are interested are going to lose their livelihood because of this deal. That our nation is going to grapple with a failing public international image when you pull out of an international agreement and then you come and you suppress your own nationals using a foreign national to implement laws. But you see, the lack of civic competence makes the nationals complacent. The inefficient judicial system will also make it very hard for you to actually see the light of day of that particular litigation.
Well, now that we may agree that looking at that agreement designed without an exit clause and all the shabby way it was drafted, can we pick some or look at the positives in this whole thing, that probably after all the exposure Richard talked about, probably we can see good agreements drafted in future. Could it be a benchmark now that hopefully we will see better agreements held in future? I don't know.
I think number one, you can't call that agreement shabby, neither can you call it shallow. As a matter of fact, I give credit to the lawyers who designed it, because
Really?
I think they have achieved their intention. Because you see, when you
Achieving the intention?
yeah, I'll tell you this.
Or the intention, driving the intention, the interests of the public.
You see, the idea is that, this is why I will tell you that they're smart. That if at all the person who paid them to sort of protect their interests, then these lawyers were smart enough to know that actually we can design an agreement that can cause public uproar. That's a smart lawyer, my friend. An average lawyer would have just made it basic and protective, and that's it. But if your intention, I mean that's now the craftiness of any profession, that you don't simply go in, you know, you are into business for various perspectives, right? This agreement can be a tool of advocacy, depending on how you see it. Okay? But above all, what is the positive side of this? Number one, I think it raises up the question of the dead discussion. Remember the coffee bill that was there? Now the coffee bill, which was coming actually, even it was, I think, in my opinion, more dangerous. Because that's an agreement. The other one was a law.
Yeah.
So the revival of that discussion on what it means to add production. Number two, the discussion of protecting regional and local interests of farmers. And I think the discussion of revival of cooperative unions as key stakeholders. I think thirdly, it gives us an opportunity to demonstrate that actually Parliament is a sleepy Parliament. What guarantee do you have that Parliament 10 years from now will not do what it did 10 years ago? To keep quiet concerning the same agreement.
That's a big question I may not attempt now. Viewers, this is The Dialogue. My name is Simapolo, and Simon Senyonga is a lawyer and an activist, and we have Richard Baguma, he's a communication specialist, and she sits in today as an analyst. We will go for a break. But Baguma, when we return, I want you to tell us whether all is lost, because you said either way, we will pay. But
Promise me that you'll have a cup of coffee during the break.
All right.
With the Vinci deal.
We'll go for a break, and we'll be returning back shortly. Welcome from the break. This is The Dialogue. My name is Simapolo, and on the show we have Richard Baguma, senior communications consultant and an analyst, and we have a lawyer, Simon Senyonga, to look at matters of national importance. We are still looking at how Parliament adopted a report to cancel the committee report to terminate the contract between Vinci Coffee Company Limited and government. A very contentious and controversial matter that has been in public discourse now for almost 2 months. And Ugandans have been really waiting for the moment and waiting for what the decision will be from Parliament. And for us today, we are looking at what next after Parliament pronounces itself on this very contentious matter. And from the committee recommendations, which are actually 6.
The agreement executed.
Yes, read by Honorable Mwene Mpaka. The issue was, actually the verdict was that the agreement signed between Government of Uganda and Vichy Coffee Company Limited is unconstitutional, illegal, void, and there is this Latin word, I know Simon may tell, ab initio, and unenforceable at law. The government is directed to terminate this agreement and report to Parliament within 6 months from the date of adoption of this report. So there is that period of 6 months before maybe another step is taken, or within which another. Upon termination, government should regularize its relationship with Uganda Coffee Vichy Company Limited through proper due diligence, due process, and proper stakeholder consultation before any further business can proceed, thus initiating fresh negotiations. So there's a window for fresh negotiations. There it is. Government should consider extending appropriate incentives to other to already existing 47 local companies that are doing value addition. Then government should fast track the capitalization of UDC, Uganda Development Corporation, to enable the corporation to invest in soluble coffee plants. Then there is urgent need for competition law to promote vigorous competition and prevent anti-competitive business practices. Then lastly, the officials who committed government to such illegalities should be penalized as a deterrent mechanism to stop similar occurrences in future. I think those are very, very good recommendations. But Baguma says, either way, we must pay.
Yeah, but you see, either way we must pay because we have already committed ourselves to the agreement. So the recommendations.
There's a window for renegotiation, I think.
Well, I don't know if there exists a clause like that one of renegotiation anywhere in this in this agreement. It might be prudent for the other party to renegotiate in a manner that will placate again this public anger and seem to make Parliament look relevant.
It's all lost. It's all lost now.
I don't know what all means, but all is never lost to a big population. I think for me, all is lost when you die. Because you are an individual, you go. And each one of us will somehow goes. That's when all is lost. But the others remain. And like I always say in my private conversations, you know, I say the world goes on. Whatever happens, it doesn't matter. Whatever tsunami, it doesn't. The world goes on. The thing is, it goes on. How to you? Because we are a collection of individuals. You see, this coffee thing. It is a money maker. We really need to understand part of some of the things that motivate.
The deal was a money-making venture?
No, coffee generally is a money maker.
Okay, good.
It is the largest money maker for Uganda if you take away
gold, I think.
There are gold, and we know gold is artificial. Which gold are we mining? The excitement about oil, but we know it has been for decades. And it's going to be for decades. So for any strategic person who wants to be in the multi-billion economy now and in the future, having a strong stand and part to play in the coffee area will ensure generational wealth for you and the generations to come. Now, if you can do that using the law, that is even better. And that's why you see the coffee bill.
That's what they are trying to do.
That's why you see the coffee bill, the nature of the coffee bill. The people who sit down to draft these bills put in a lot of effort. But you see, all the laws, the legal crafting is based on is always responding to the objectives of the ones who are behind the drafting. In even an agreement, when you go to the lawyers to draft for you anything, they ask you, what is it? What how do we know? Who are who? It's not them originating this. It is you originating this, and they write it in a manner that suits your thinking, your objective, your request, your need. So you can read the needs of the people who are behind the coffee bill, for example. And you cannot divorce the process of the coffee bill from the withdrawal from the ICO, from the Vinci agreement. These are all streams that are flowing into the same river, the same water reservoir. So that's one. But two, you need to look at the coffee, that the coffee wealth has been in the eyes of the ones who are in power, including even the one in colonial times, including even now. One of the reasons that is being cited for us to withdraw from the ICO is that when our countries, the third world countries, are exporting processed coffee, the tariffs are up to 60%
for developing countries
of the value of the coffee. And yet for the developed countries, it is very low, in sometimes zero. But the International Coffee Organization says the tariffs for trade are not our.
That is the unfairness.
Yes, the International Coffee, it says tariffs of trade are not our jurisdiction. It's the International Trade Organization, the ITO. So there is also global ping pong that happens in there. You say, it's ongoing, it's an constant. Of course, it has been discussed severally, but you see, we are not the ones with the jurisdiction. You have to go to the ITO. So when somebody is justifying why they would withdraw, they have a very convincing justification to withdraw from the ICO.
But they have their own interests.
But then the same are doing a Vinci agreement and bringing a coffee bill. And so it's like you want to replace this group
with another.
But they are all doing the same shake approaches. So take the 60 or whatever it is, this money, because the objective is to keep us exporting coffee beans, to make it unsustainable for us to process. So it's say, okay, withdraw, let's process our own, because there is a market. They don't take 100% market anyway, because you see the way they were doing our coffee. For instance, they will take it, and when they process it, they say it's Brazil or it's Colombia. But it's here. It happens also for our tea. Our tea is packaged not as Ugandan tea. No, but some of the neighboring countries actually claim it after we auction. So the noble objectives that are stated, when it comes to doing the implementation, you replace this shack A with shack B.
That's the predicament we are in.
That's the predicament that we are in. And then you bring a pathologist. The pathologists are the ones who do postmortem.
The parliament.
Yes. So our national pathologist, our parliament, to do for you a postmortem.
Richard, one of the recommendations is that the officials behind the agreement should be penalized.
No, in front of the agreement. Okay. I said the ones behind the agreement, we don't know them. I don't even think Parliament can touch them. It is the officials in front of the agreement. And the officials behind the agreement, if they think the officials in front are still useful,
there's nothing.
The Parliament can make it recommendations, and thank you very much.
We have to wind up. What do you envisage now, especially about these recommendations? Very strong recommendations.
I think the first thing concerning what would be of interest is making sure that we design sufficient competition laws that can protect our interests, where there is, there's serious competition, there is serious bidding, and then
and Parliament, as legislators, have a big stake in putting that into effect.
Well, 10 years ago they never did it. I'm just hoping that, again, I'm just hoping that 10 years after,
either as private members' bills or through government bills.
And that's why I was telling you, the celebration, for example, is not in Parliament closing 1 year off and passing very many bills and all these private members' bills, how many responses, 19 questions answered by the Prime Minister and all that kind of thing. The biggest interest should be, for example, the competition laws. How do we have a preemptive approach
to such
such situations, because there are going to be many, and so it can't just only be only this. Number two, concerning the question of penalizing the officials, it's the same thing, that the same debate that arose concerning Dr. Musenero's rights and the preside.
It was hot this week in Parliament again.
Yes, the thing is that can they be touched? When the president has come out clearly to vow and say, if you touch Musenero, that was at, I think, Kololo, said, you can't touch this lady. She protected us, did what in COVID and all this.
A decorated scientist.
So the thing is that their recommendations, again, will simply be recommendations, but also it gets to sanitize them. They look like they have done some kind of good work for the nationals. But when you have an honest conversation...
haven't they played, to some extent, haven't they played their role as...
No, they haven't played their role.
Oversight role, and they have played it, Parliament.
Because you see, oversight is not just the end result that you give, but the initial steps that you take. Now, for this Parliament, what we call the 11th Parliament, they have tried. The thing is that they will be tested. Okay, and all parliaments over the years have been tested, whether it was on the term limits, whether it was on the age limits, whether it was on whatever discussion you can have, which was contentious, on the oil deals, on all these kind of things, the helicopter, just and all those kind of things. They have been tested. The thing is that what the Ugandans should be more interested in is not the recommendations. The same parliament still has power to design, to move a law. It can even be a private member's bill towards having competition laws. That's where, for me, the interest should be. Until that recommendation, because oversight should be very clear, categorically clear. What is within our ambit as Parliament to initiate, what is not within our ambit. If it's not within our ambit, how can we extend our power? For example, in enforcement, how can we support the police and the institutions? You know, as they're discussing all these things, and you know,
between the government of Uganda
and you know, the thing is that it's interesting, the clash that is happening. Government is talking about right now, we are going to punish the Vinci people and all this kind of thing, but immediately the recommendations are coming out. The budget has already been passed. The appropriation bill has already been passed for the budget. So if it was a question of what could be done in terms of aligning resources, I am hoping that we can say much more rigorous debate towards that end.
All right. Thank you so much, Simon and Richard. Let's hope for the best.
Oh, as always.
6 months.
We can't have a hopeless nation. It would be disaster. So we have to keep hope, of course.
Yeah, within 6 months, a lot must play out. Looking at what happened in these 4 weeks, the president inviting the committee for an engagement, and you hope that in these 6 months, as recommended by the committee, a lot will happen. And we wait to see what will happen. My name is Simapolo, and let's now shift gears and look at the budget. Richard Baguma is really looking at that 48 trillion budget. It has been revised. Initially, it was meant to be 47, and now it is 48. And I said the biggest chunk of this budget now goes to human capital development, health, education and gender, and then governance and security comes, and all others. I don't know what, give us a preamble of what you think this budget will be like, because the State Minister for Finance, Henry Musasi, said that this budget now sets ground for recovery after the COVID-19 pandemic. In a sense, he's saying it's a good one this time to set Uganda on the road to recovery.
Yeah, of course. What would the Honorable Musasi say? What else would he say? That my budget is not a good one? So that's when it would be news if he said my budget is not a good one. But the fact that he says it's a good one, that is what we would expect of him. Yes, you see, on paper, and I say if, the budget was to be implemented as presented, then, and the money not stolen, then you would certainly see, I think, very credible results. That's one. So the focus on health, on education, on gender, even security, rational security. I think for me, I have no problem investing in rational security. In fact, there is no country worth its salt that does not robustly invest in its security. So otherwise, all your investments in agriculture and education will be undone by insecurity. So yes, on paper, this is a good budget. And if it were to be implemented, then you'd certainly, no question, you'd see the population gaining more. If you look at the current mantra, the blueprint is the parish development model. Yeah. Now, the model is certainly a good model. Yes. It's like you do a plan of a building, and when it comes to construction, you don't construct the way you planned. And this is very common, for example, these shopping malls. They plan and underground is parking. In actual sense, they are shops. So then you find crowding and all kinds of manner of things around the malls. So this is what for me the first comment. It's a good budget if it is implemented as it is on paper, as presented. The concerns now we have to have are we have not been able to finance our budgets previously. So one has to look a bit more deeply, has to be keener on what is going to be different now, particularly in the circumstances of COVID, that is going to change so that we are able to finance our budget the way we plan to. That's one. So it's possible that you will have shortfalls. And what happens is then the areas in agriculture, in education, in human development are the ones which are called non-priority and therefore go budgeted for but unfunded. Then say unfunded priorities. So that's worry number one. So we first of all, very good budget on as presented, very good plans, very good model. Now we go to the implementation, and that's where we usually have problems. So even when the money goes down, and I usually use even when the money gets released, I usually use the example of the UPE. Until an NGO went to study the actual disbursements of the UPE money and said, but look, for every 100 shillings, it's only 13 that goes down to the learner. So while the money looks good and big, it does not get to the target beneficiary. So that's the one other thing. If you look at the budget and look at it deeply, what are the costs of administering? What are the expenses within those allocations to the human development, human capital development sectors, which we are happy about? We also need to look at them. So one, unfunded priorities. Two, where is the money actually going in real sense? Three, we know the level of hemorrhage through corruption. Yeah, that has been happening. So what is there in 2022, 2023 that would give anyone comfort that the hemorrhage will not continue or even grow? Like in some circles think that it has actually been growing, becoming smarter, becoming deeper, and more insidious, and therefore more destructive. So that's also the other area that we need to ask ourselves and say, where does it happen? But for me, is to examine what are the stimulus packages. You are talking about, well, post-COVID. COVID hasn't gone yet, but at least it has gone down. In the budget, what are the specific stimulus packages for the hemorrhaging sectors within those areas? We talk about education as the biggest recipient. We know that schools have closed. They are being sold. Even the other properties of school owners have been mortgaged. We know that teachers have moved. Post-COVID, they went to be chapati sellers and border. They are not coming back. Actually, Apollo, a week does not go without a news outlet reporting a shortage of teachers in each of the regions of this country. So for me, if we are saying this is a recovery budget, where are those specific investments, strategic investments, that are looking at the recovery of our human capital development sectors? And you see, so they are not there, when you have recovery packages that are targeting the Nama investors who are non-existent, which are targeting the Naguru investors who are ghosts, then there will be ghost recovery.
It has been made clear that the five-year national development plan all will be focusing on the parish development model to help that chunk of the population to be lifted into the money economy, and that looks to be the magic wand. This government is banking all its hopes on to bring that recovery you're talking about, Richard.
No, but you see, for me, every 5 years, there is a phrase coined, either in English or in the local language, to talk what the parish development model is saying. Every 5 years, there will be Bonaba Gagawari, there will be something for all, prosperity for all, there will be, so every 5 years.
So in itself, it's not new.
So
in itself.
So no, it's not new. You just change the wording, and everybody must.
But the concept is new.
Which concept? Of fighting poverty.
Taking money to parishes.
No, in fact, it is the concept the concept is not. A parish is just a structure. The concept is fighting poverty, increasing the household incomes. That's a new concept.
It's not.
How many years have we been talking about household income?
But the strategy.
Again, what is new about the strategy? I want to hear what is new, except the name. Yeah, because you see, sorry for laughing this much. You see, for me, in communication, there is something we call perception engineering.
Yeah.
It's one of the important areas when you study communication, especially when you study when you study what we call generating consent. If you go, you see, communication is really about generating consent. So when you go, there is that part of engineering. Now, what you do in that engineering is to engineer the perception. So it's like you have a Corolla and a Corona and a Mark X and what?
They are all vehicles.
If you look at the engines, they are Japanese vehicles. The engines are the same if the mechanics know, but you change the shape of the lights. These ones are round, these ones are rectangular, and these ones are triangular. And then the name.
Simon, it looks like Richard is not optimistic about what we expect in the next financial year's budget that was ready yesterday, that was passed yesterday in Parliament.
I think are the concerns valid? I think they are valid. For me, my interest is really, when you look at the theme of the budget, I think it's based on industrialization and all this kind of thing. And as you said, the biggest mantra is the parish development model. Going beyond even the positive attributes of the model, and what failed all other models that we have been talking about, what you call the empowerment models, youth livelihood program, Emyoga, Bonabaga Gawari.
Emyoga is still running. I think 100 billion has been appropriated.
The challenge has always
towards Emyoga.
Well, yeah, the issue has not always been the design of the model. Again, as I said, most of the times we are also a post-mortem kind of, nation. For example, are you aware that there is no supportive law for the parish development model? They're just designing it backwards. And you see, it speaks to the broader attitude, especially even when dealing with the budgets. For example, when supplementary budgets are passed, most of the times they come to Parliament just to sanitize when they have already used the money.
Really?
It's a practice. It's not something new. It's what has been happening. When you talk about the financial hemorrhage and the lack of fiscal discipline as a nation, you're not only looking at the aftermath of how the budget was used. It begins from the time, for example, we don't have a properly designed law. And then you move ahead to push a program. Why are you running so quickly with it? Because number one, the point about to implement at the parish level are not even existent not just in terms of the office being there by name, in terms of the efficient management of resources. The thing that failed other models was also the political alienation of some sectors. I mean, you can read the undertones, the political undertones happening in this current race of Omoro and everywhere, where I saw Richard Todwong, the SG, coming out to say, if you vote opposition, you will be alienating yourself. He's learning from his master, the president, who says if you vote opposition. So the thing is that there are constituencies which are run by so to say the opposition, where the members of parliament or the structural composition is made up of the opposition. So, and you're saying that the model is going to affect everybody, but you are politically alienating, you're pronouncing yourself that this people will not benefit. So the lack of the fiscal discipline, the inexistence of a proper legal framework, and thinking that you will enforce, you put a framework afterwards. I've just been responding to a tweet by the chairperson of the National Youth Council, who is by law designed to protect the interests of the youth of Uganda by the National Youth Council Act, who is crying foul, saying that we have just realized that the parish development model was never representing the aspirations of the youth, who are the biggest demographic in this nation. But on a previous show on a national broadcaster, his predecessor, who is now a minister, is she a minister? Lydia Naba, I know that she's a minister or something.
No, she's not.
MP of Chitugum.
She's not a minister.
Woman MP. She came out and said, no, this model here is protecting the youth.
She is the Secretary General for the NRM caucus.
Okay. She was saying that this model protects the youth. It is very good. And she was being challenged. She was actually going against a lawyer who was saying that the biggest thing you're going to run into is the lack of a legal framework. Now the predecessor, the successor is saying that, look here, we never saw these things happening. So the issue is that the budget, does it protect our interests? Now, on the two priority areas, beyond the permanent hit maker, which is the defense and and security. And I never listened, I never heard of the term rational security. I've learned something new. Rational security, that's something I'm going to use often. I think it's more for us to have rational security as opposed to irrational security budget.
But security is very close. We have human capital development at 8.74 trillion, followed by governance and security at 7.0 trillion. Then integrated transport, infrastructure and services getting 4.17 trillion.
Now, this question of human capital development, before we go into this new appropriation bill, previously, the Ministry of Information and Technology had allocated over close to 200 billions on mindset change. And that is one of the key components of human capital development. When you read NDP3, which is one of the key implementing documents, and Vision 2040, one of the things they're focusing on was mindset change. Now, obviously, we don't have enough time to unpack what you call mindset change and as to whether you're aligning it to some sort of political ideology and all that kind of thing. But most interesting for me is the priority area of health and education and what is informing our priorities in that regard. As you have always hosted me and as I've consistently made an argument, for example, as we speak right now, and I like that Richard made a very profound statement concerning what happens in the UN discussions. As we speak right now, Uganda is moving into what is called a vaccine treaty, which is actually going to give up the interests, the sovereign interests of a nation to be overseen. The interests of the health sector of nations is going to be overseen by the World Health Organization.
Really?
Now, most people are not keen on what's happening on the international platform. And most of the times we design national budgets, but not putting into perspective what they are going to mean for our international, because we don't exist in some sort of village. We're in a global community. What does this budget represent and mean to us on an international platform? Now, most of the health priorities we have right now, with new laws we are trying to pass, for example, the Public Health Amendment Bill, beyond just the whole discussion of vaccine mandates and all that kind of thing, it's actually an appeasement strategy towards Western powers to align our health priorities towards what they think is important. When you read through the priority areas of most of the budgetary interests, they are not just for the purposes of the Ugandan people.
But
now,
why?
The controlling power is again surrendered, because that's what he was talking about, that the global ping pong, what you call the global ping pong, that there are global interests in all these areas.
But can we avoid can we avoid that foreign influence? Can we do really?
But how do you avoid it when, for example, your debt burden is increasing and you're not able to you're not able to meet URA is struggling to meet the targets of collecting the taxes, and so your reliance is basically on foreign nations, and even when reliance could not be bad on that, but we're saying the fiscal indiscipline that we have, we're talking about the inexistent laws. So you're implementing models that you're saying that are
our
going to be
debt
good.
to GDP ratio now is at 53.1, way above the threshold.
And maybe what that can mean now to the common Ugandan who is watching is that you have to pay. So eventually, there are people who are asking for supplementary budgets. The taxes eventually will keep on increasing on key issues, on key areas that affect you as a Ugandan. Because until a Ugandan, that debt burden, our GDP to this ratio is that, what it simply means to them is that the goods, the services you're going to be able to access are going to become more expensive. They are going to become more inaccessible. So that's what it actually means. That's what the budget ideally would mean for the Ugandan. So for me, the excitement is not in the reading of a new budget. I think that is a ritual, and we have mastered the art of being ritualistic. The most important thing is having a closer scrutiny and advocacy around what should be the areas that we think are priority. And even for the Ugandans to pick interest in this, because at times we speak very high level language, but the Ugandans don't realize that this affects them. They leave the discussion of the budgets to the Richards, to the Simons. They say, "Oh, you talk about it. For us, leave us with what they call quote unquote common issues." Let me help a common Ugandan out there. In a home setting, you have a budget. You will know what needs to be priority. If you are a father in a house and your priority is not taking care of your household, but rather paying off debts,
then it is a problem.
It becomes a problem. That's what it means for you as a Ugandan. That if you have a budget which is focused on that area, and what will not be the interests of the children or the household, then eventually the household is not going to run as it's supposed to be running.
Richard, Simon raises a very pertinent issue about why we are finding ourselves in a very tight position, just because we have a big debt to service, and it's more likely, and it has been predicted, that we are going even to borrow more in subsequent years, looking at the revenue projections and the targets, and how we are failing to meet those targets. We are now vulnerable to foreign influence, even when we have an appropriation that shows that we are now going in the right direction. Our policies may be influenced by foreigners, and eventually we may not benefit.
And for example, one of the things that is most critical to human survival is food. So it's two things: it's food and medicine. If you look at the current global alignments around food, you see that the developed world is really doing everything they can to take total control
Of food
globally. In fact, if you look at one of the commonest things now that are being talked about in global discourse is the phrase food systems. Food systems, food system realignment, food system. It's about food. And you see,
in relation to this budget of the next financial year, agro-business, that is agriculture, has been given 1.2 trillion. That's fairly an improvement. Related to what you're talking about.
No, let me tell you. Food system is from farm to mouth. Actually, this is usually I say from farm to fork. Now, the coffee you took this morning is not just about agriculture. Agriculture is just farm. You have industry because it is processed. You have transport because it has to be transported.
Infrastructure. And
You have trade because it has to be traded. So you have all this. That is why the term food system is, and there is this great mistake. And I see all the donors, the international NGOs pushing us into the confusion that food systems are about agriculture. No way. In fact, if you have seen in this country, the greatest problem has not been lack of food. It has been in poor food distribution. There is a famine in this side, and there is surplus in this side. But you know what is happening? The ones who are coming to help where there is famine are bringing food, are importing food from outside. It is not their interest to provide market for the food where there is surplus. Their interest is to provide market for the food. So they say, we have given you support on food, and then they go bring their food. And you see that in seed. Of course, because seed is the genesis. And if you want to control this system, then and that's why you see, they tell us that, you see, I keep asking people, what's wrong with our indigenous seeds? But all of us get driven to go buy seeds from
shops.
What is that container thing?
Container.
That one. Who is driving us? Why?
Container village.
How come we used our granary system and we had never been in famine? So what has changed? So your perception is being engineered.
How do you relate food with the budget? Take us back.
Yeah, because you are saying that they are providing the largest amount of money to this area.
Yeah.
They recognize. And you see, like this government, for it understands it from a security angle. Because where you have food insecurity, you have all other forms of insecurity. So food security is key to any security infrastructure. And that one they understand. This analysis they have, that they understand. So when you see this money going there. But one of the things that has been happening is that it is one of the easiest way. Infrastructure classified expenditure and agriculture have been one of the best areas where money is siphoned off.
Really?
Yes. It is not by mistake that you have, how many ministries do you have where you have a general as a permanent secretary? How many ministries? We have how many? 80 ministries, something?
81.
But how many ministries that have a general as a permanent
military
secretary?
general.
So you see, when you don't connect these things, which operation in this country is commanded by the second most important general in the country?
It is Operation Wealth.
And what is it about? These things are not by mistake. And once you start seeing them, then you see the resource,
budget.
The resource movement
to that area.
Yes, these things are not by mistake. The designs are very well thought through, and we need to understand them very much. So when you think that at the parish level, you are going to benefit from the trillions that go to agriculture, I'm a little sorry for you.
Okay. Richard, there is a namesake, Tinka Simire, Honorable Barnabas, and he's a resident panelist here. Honor that he missed because he had an event in his constituency. He says, Bunyoro University, he sent a message right away, he's watching. Bunyoro University, once again, for the first time in a row, misses out from the national budget. It is a very sad day for the people of Bunyoro and Busoga, as the two proposed public universities in the budget framework paper did not appear anywhere in the budget. The national budget is now 48.1 trillion and the two universities are not included. Now, we were talking about education and others taking the biggest chunk of the budget, but there are still grievances within that sector. Bunyoro University and Busoga University have not been allocated the budget.
Yeah, but why are we having territorial universities?
Why not?
Why are we having territorial? Do we need them?
Why not?
Do we need them?
The other time,
do we need a university for Eastern Uganda?
You had to travel,
or do we need
Richard, you had to travel from either Bushenyi or where to come to study from.
But the students who are in Barara University are not from Barara right now. No. They are from all over. So do we need territorial universities? Do we need every tribal territory to have a university?
Because
you see, this is a tribal territory.
It promotes accessibility.
Ankore, Busoga, Bunyoro, Buganda, so Bukedi, Busamia, is that the model on which our tertiary education should be designed?
I think the bottom line should be accessibility and easy access, and it's now not a problem if we have all these universities spread across the country.
I think for me we should be talking about quality education, quality tertiary education that is responsive to the market and not tribal-based universities.
Simon,
that's my view.
We only have 10 minutes to wind up. But if we talk about this budget and we don't talk about the current trends in the economics of our country, the rising prices of commodities. Before I came to the show, one businessman told me about sugar, that if the price you knew about sugar before you came to the show, as you go back it will have changed to at least 500, meaning an increment of about 500, which is not a small thing. The prices are continuously increasing. The fuel prices, you people here, we know what we go through buying fuel, and everyone who has at least tested the wrath of what is happening out there. And I don't know if what has been appropriated in the budget, you see it will in any way address this particular issue. We wait for the head of state. It is now official that he will be speaking to the nation, addressing the nation tomorrow about the same issue, but it is still a very, very, very contentious issue.
Well, I think number one, it is the economic stance that we take that tend to affect our response. You know, the thing is that most Ugandans tend to think, and they have been made to believe, especially by the government. When I say government, I don't only mean those who are in the ruling party, but even those, whether they be in opposition, but are holding leadership positions. Most of them have been made to believe that the international events are the ones which have highly propagated the prices. I will not be shocked if that is the argument of the president. Well, he has said it before. That's because of Ukraine and Russia that, you know, we're having all this. And I depart respectfully from that perspective. My argument has always been that the stand we took, for example, to lock down the nation, adopting blanket measures that were rather harsh to the people. And that's where, for me, the genesis was. That yes, you have something which is a crisis, and then you adopt blanket measures that affect the nation. You may not have loved Tanzania's stand concerning these issues, but it managed to achieve middle income status, which has been our eternal aspiration. As long as we have known this government to be there, we have always aspired to be a middle income country. A nation never took that stand, it achieved it. We took that alternative stand, we never achieved. We actually just went down. The fuel prices you're talking about, in January, I think this year, before the prices shot very high, remember the genesis of that? It was the forceful PCR testing on the borders or for the fuel drivers. Eventually, they had to cause a strike. And it was not only within the borders of Uganda and Kenya, it was global. That as long as people kept on enforcing unfair mandates based on a disease which had minimal effects, because you see, it's you who makes it amplified, and you make it so dangerous, and you make it so terrible. So our response towards some of these so-called international crises make us also get into this kind of situation. Number two, I like what Richard talked about, the question of the stimulus packages. So when we get into lockdown, a quick stimulus package, what we call Nabanja's money, remember that money, the 100,000 to appear on your phone? Did it reach?
No, I didn't.
Well, the issue was
it was for the vulnerable, and it looks like they looked at me as not vulnerable.
They even closed an NGO which had been doing that.
No, well, you see, again, the thing is that what in a lesson you learned from COVID was that we are very slow at defining who exactly things are and what things are exactly. So, for example, a term came up and they said there are those who are called essential workers. Well, what do you call essential? Are you essential to my children? I'm essential to them. You may be essential to somewhere else, but you get the thing. The question of vulnerability. What I'm talking about is the stimulus packages. So what happens? 2020, the theme of the budget, as I conclude, was recapitalization of the economy. We get money from the African Development Bank to recapitalize Uganda Development Bank. That money was, instead of being used to recapitalize the bank, it was given off to other people who are not vulnerable, one of whom was the owner of Akamwesi hostels. Now, was the priority of the stimulus package really recapitalizing a bank? Why is nobody asking those questions? When we talk about a stimulus package, there has to be consistent channels, such as the Uganda Development Bank. But the stimulus package, which was designed to help 2 years ago, was mismanaged. So even if the stimulus package is put in this current budget, there is no guarantee. So that wraps up into one statement: accountability. The question of the usage of the resources goes back to accountability, not just financial accountability, but even political accountability. That by virtue of the fact that I'm occupying a political position, I should be able to be mindful of the response, to be mindful of the image I have internationally, to be mindful of my responses amidst what I am perceiving to be as my stand, whether it be internationally, regionally, or even nationally.
Richard, I said we cannot talk about the budget without looking at the economic outlook and the trends happening, especially on high commodity prices.
Yeah, the high commodity prices, I was, I was in South Africa a week or so ago, and there's a similar crisis. And and in Kenya too. I think we have a challenge of prices going up globally. I think the differences we have are in our responses. In the responses of how, you see, for instance, we know now that the children were going back to school, and we knew. So how do we support schools so that the parents are not killed really by the expenses? What happened, and I pay for many children beyond what I have biologically, is the lists increased, they became longer, the monies became more, and the schools have all these arguments they are making because they also have to cover their costs, which are going very high. I'm giving that as one example. We also know that, for example, the taxation, if you look at the amendments being made to the finance bill along the taxation, it is not doing anything to help the business community. They are making it worse and harsher.
But no new taxes have been introduced.
No, but you see, and that's what I always say, that you have one word here, but the provisions you are introducing actually have the impact. Okay. So you don't pronounce that we have increased this commodity from this, but the provisions, the specific provisions you are put there have actually the effect of increasing what businesses have to pay. So in my view, while you might go to the public and tell them we are not increasing anything, the business person who is doing business on every day can see the difficulty they are facing. And for me, those are the untruths.
In just 1 minute, I talked about Dr. Kizza Besigye coming up with a campaign to awaken Ugandans. Do you think it is appropriate and realistic?
For me, I've told you that there are two politicians here who I pay attention to. One is the President Yoweri Museveni, the other one is the kind of retired Kizza Besigye. They are the two politicians I pay attention to in this country. Because for me, forget everything else, they are obstinate. Yes, they are obstinate. They get an issue and they stick. And whatever the consequences to their lives and their families and their relatives and what, many of us are unable to do that. So yes, Ugandans need awakening. All of us need awakening. So if it is the Dr. Besigye way, thank you very much. If it's another way, if it is him coming on air and educating Ugandans, that's okay. But certainly we need awakening. And the president always tells us, I am thinking he will tell us even this Sunday that we are sleeping.
What do you think would be the president's message, predict the president's message? Because Simon said he could predict the president will be referring to the war in Russia, between Russia and Ukraine, that is escalating the matters here.
No, I think I want to remain respectful to the president, if only for the fact that him and my father were friends. So I if only for that reason. But you see, for somebody who has been speaking for 40 years, whom you have been listening to for 40 years, I think it's not difficult to predict what they will say. I am not, and I don't think it's different from the previous address. No.
Well, we have to close the show, but do you find this government stance on commodity prices and insisting that they cannot do anything about it, do you find it appropriate in just one statement?
Disingenuous. I find it disingenuous.
Simon, what do you think about this government stance that it can't do anything about it either way?
I think they need to first account for the response they took during the COVID pandemic of locking down the nation. And I think accountability includes you being remorseful for some of the measures as opposed to being defensive for what you're doing. And I think being accommodative for alternative views. And that's what justifies, as Richard has said here, some of the political stands that are being taken. I saw Bobby Wine launch something called Kunga. You have Besige's way. And also you're going to have Mr. Museveni's way of awakening the nationals.
Let's wait to see what will be in the president's address tomorrow, and hope for the best, because we can't really appreciate what is happening. Prices are actually going higher and higher and higher, and it is becoming very, very hard to cope up with the economics in this country. My name is Simapolo. I must thank Simon Senyonga, a lawyer and an activist. Thank you so much for finding time today.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Richard Baguma, it's always a pleasure having you on this show.
My pleasure too, and I'm glad that Senyonga saw me without a chuparata. Now he can see me with grey hair. I thank God. God is always great.
Our viewers, thank you so much for being with us all these 2 hours. We'll be returning next week. The dialogue is now going out. My name is Apollo, and I must thank everybody behind the production of this program. Good afternoon, and have a splendid weekend.